You're across from someone who's been silent too long. They've stared at the ceiling at night, tasting regret, not tears, but the cold ash of unmet potential. They know the weight of betrayal. They've always been nice, and that nicety has left scars deeper than fists ever could. Welcome to what you've avoided until now. You come here without pretense. No healing balm, no sugar. Just the unvarnished edge of truth you've been too tired to face. You sense something shifting in the air beneath your skin. Something dormant, stirring for vindication. This is that moment. Exposure without apology. You feel it in your chest, that hollow that's been buzzing, finally ready to speak. Subscribe if you've grown tired of being small. Comment if you crave the clarity that terrorizes your comfort. They whispered that power belongs only to the loud. They were wrong. Silence carries truth heavier than any shout. You know that, don't you? The world demands performance. You refuse. You don't need to be seen. You are presence. It's surgical, unspoken. Your calm is a blade. When you stop defending, they begin to question themselves. And that's all the leverage you ever need. They told you kindness would bring connection, that if you loved harder, stayed softer, swallowed your instincts, you'd be chosen. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew the world doesn't reward virtue. It exploits it. It eats it alive in marble courts and modern offices, in bedrooms and boardrooms. Behind smiles and contracts and prayers, the first dark truth: people will betray you not when they stop needing you, but when they believe they can get away with it. Not because they're cruel, but because they're opportunistic. That's human nature. No sentiment, no poetry, just cost-benefit. You weren't hurt because you were too emotional. You were hurt because you assumed they'd never see you as disposable. But Machiavelli taught, never trust the appearance of loyalty. Trust the structure of consequences. Because loyalty without consequence is fantasy, and fantasy gets people used. You were trained to be liked, and because of that, you were trained to be weak. They didn't apologize because they were sorry. They apologized because you didn't react. That silence made you dangerous. That pause before your answer made them reconsider. You don't need revenge. You need presence. You don't need to prove you were right. You need to stop engaging with those who feel safer when you're unsure of yourself. Second, dark truth. Most people don't want truth. They want stability. Even if that stability is built on delusion, they will choose the lie that keeps them comfortable over the truth that requires transformation. That's why your honesty was punished. That's why your clarity made them squirm. It wasn't you, it was what your presence exposed. You reminded them of what they couldn't hide. You stared when they blinked. You spoke when they deflected. You existed without apology. And that's a threat to every false identity built on approval. Machiavelli never said, be cruel. He said, control perception, control environment, appear merciful when it serves, be feared only when it counts. Your mistake? You thought being feared meant being aggressive. The most feared people are calm, measured, indifferent to validation. That's what makes them unpredictable. That's what makes them untouchable. They called you intense, too much, cold, but that wasn't an insult. That was their fear talking. Fear that they could no longer manipulate you with softness. Fear that their charm no longer worked. Fear that you finally became the one thing they couldn't read, and therefore couldn't control. Third dark truth. Power isn't in what you say. It's in what you withhold, in the pause between their demand and your response, in the way you look at them when they expect an emotional reaction, and instead, you give them silence. It's not the threat of rage that unbalances people. It's your refusal to explain yourself. When you stop performing your pain, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are dangerous, because the world is full of emotional predators who depend on predictability. They train you to express everything. to share, to open up, to be vulnerable. But Machiavelli understood. Vulnerability is only strength when you control the timing, the context, the witness. Otherwise, it's ammunition, a blueprint of your weaknesses. He didn't trust men based on their words. He studied their patterns, what they did under pressure, who they became when there was no reward. Most people don't reveal who they are. They reveal what you want them to be. Until it no longer benefits them, then they shift. That shift, that's who they always were. You keep asking, why did they change? They didn't. You just stopped serving their image of themselves. And once that mirror cracked, they discarded you like anything else that reflects their emptiness back at them. It's brutal, isn't it? But it's not personal. Machiavelli said, men are driven by two things, fear and interest. If you're not useful and you're not feared, you're forgotten. Now you understand why your loyalty was never enough, why your silence was interpreted as weakness, why your kindness was seen as compliant. You thought they saw your soul. They were scanning for leverage. You're not here to be liked anymore. You're here to become unreadable. And from the shadows of your restraint, you will own a different kind of power. The kind that doesn't chase, doesn't prove, doesn't beg. The kind that chooses when to reveal and when to disappear. They only respected you when you stopped needing them, not when you forgave them. Not when you gave them another chance. Not when you explained, pleaded, clarified. They respected you the moment you became indifferent. Fourth dark truth. Absence commands more power than presence when it's intentional, because distance, when weaponized, is not a retreat. It's a recalibration of power. You thought your presence was the gift. It wasn't. Your withdrawal was. They took you for granted because you were always available. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. Like water in their hands. Like light they never questioned, until it vanished. Now they feel it. The void. The echo of their own noise without your calm to balance it. Machiavelli knew. If you want to influence people, you must first control their expectations. You must disrupt their sense of access. Predictability breeds contempt. You think being dependable makes you valuable. Being dependable makes you predictable. Predictability makes you ordinary. And ordinary people don't command power, they get used by it. You were raised to be loyal, so you tolerated inconsistency, hoping they'd see your worth. But they didn't see your loyalty. They saw your limits, and they tested them not to understand you, but to break you. Why? Because once people know you'll stay, no matter how little they offer, they stop offering. They stop choosing you. And Machiavelli would ask, why should they? You don't respect what you don't have to earn. That's why they respected the one who gave them less. The one who was harder to read. The one who walked away and meant it. Not because that person was better, but because they had boundaries that couldn't be negotiated. That's what you must become. A presence that doesn't over-explain. A mind that doesn't over-invest. A force that doesn't chase. Because power isn't loud. It's still. And stillness isn't passive. It's reserved, focused, deadly. You don't owe access to anyone, especially not those who only want you when you're useful, soft, and quiet. From now on, let them wonder. Let them feel the silence you once filled. Let them talk to the version of you they created in their head, while you become someone else entirely. They thought they broke you because you stopped reacting, because you stopped explaining, because you no longer played the role they wrote for you. But the truth, you didn't break. You just stopped participating in the illusion. Fifth dark truth. People don't change when you confront them. They change when you remove yourself. You thought if you just found the right words, they'd understand. That if you made them feel what they did, they'd finally see it, finally get it. But they understood from the beginning. They just didn't care. They knew how much it hurt. They just calculated that it hurt you more than it cost them. And that math is what governs most relationships. Machiavelli wasn't cynical. He was precise. He knew what most people refuse to admit. Morality collapses under pressure. Integrity folds when desire outweighs risk, and the same people who praise you in public will stab you in silence if they believe it will elevate them. You thought love was a shield. It wasn't. It was bait. Because most people don't seek partners. They seek mirrors, emotional surfaces that reflect back the version of themselves they most want to believe in. The moment you show them the truth, they recoil. Not because you're wrong, but because you've shattered the fantasy, and in their eyes, that makes you the enemy. Let them call you cold. Let them say you change. Let them whisper that you're not the same person anymore. Because you're not. You've tasted your own silence. And in it, you found something lethal. Clarity. Not the kind that makes peace with the past. The kind that erases it. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes them comfortable. Especially not those who weaponized your empathy to avoid their own evolution. They weren't afraid of losing you. They were afraid of facing themselves without you there to absorb the blame. And now they sit in their story, rewinding old conversations, replaying your stillness, wondering when you became so distant. But the truth is, you were gone long before you left. Your mind left the moment you stopped explaining. Your heart left the moment you stopped hoping. And your power, it returned the moment you stopped needing closure. Because some things aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be outgrown. Sixth dark truth. Kindness without boundaries becomes currency for control. You thought being the bigger person meant swallowing your pain, giving another chance, holding space for their chaos. But Machiavelli would ask, what does that make you? A saint or a servant? You wanted peace. They wanted dominance. You brought understanding. They brought distortion. You thought, if I keep showing love, they'll change. They didn't. They adapted to take more, to blame more, to bend your forgiveness into submission. You were never dealing with confusion. You were dealing with entitlement. They knew exactly what they were doing when they crossed your line. They just didn't believe you'd enforce it, because you never had. Every time you gave them one more shot, they grew more confident that your standards were flexible, that your value was negotiable, that your silence was permission. But silence is only power when it's paired with consequence. You see that now? Now that you've stepped back, they're spiraling. Not because you're gone, but because their ability to manipulate you is gone. That's what they miss. Not your heart, not your mind, your compliance. And they'll call it love. They'll wrap it in guilt. You've changed. You're cold. You used to care, but they never mourned you. They mourned the control they lost when you stopped needing their approval. The moment you realized their affection was conditional, that was the moment you stopped offering it for free. Now you're learning what Machiavelli hinted at. It's better to be respected than loved, because love is often a lie people tell when they need something. Respect is earned when they realize your absence costs more than your presence. So you disappear, not to teach them a lesson, but to unlearn your own. The lesson that taught you to stay small so others could feel big, to stay soft so others could feel safe, to stay quiet so others could feel right. That version of you, it's dead. And you didn't kill it out of bitterness. You killed it out of clarity. The clarity that says, my value is not measured by how much I endure. It's measured by how little I tolerate now. No speeches, no explanations. You just don't show up where you're not seen. That is power. Seventh dark truth. Most people want access to your strength, not responsibility for your scars. They loved your composure, not the cost of it. They praised your loyalty, not the pain that forged it. They envied your calm, not the wars you fought in silence to keep it. You were never chosen for your softness. You were chosen because you were useful. You knew how to carry weight without complaining, how to endure without exploding, how to protect others from storms that raged inside you. But Machiavelli would remind you, usefulness is only power when it's rare, when it's controlled, when it's earned. You gave too much. You made it look easy. You thought your consistency would inspire commitment. It didn't. It just made you invisible, because the human mind doesn't value what it expects. They expected you to pick up the pieces, to stay calm when they broke things, to understand their outbursts, to forgive their silence, to explain your pain in ways that wouldn't disturb their peace. You carried it all and called it love. But what they really loved was your ability to suppress yourself for their comfort. The moment you stopped doing that, they said you changed, and in that accusation, they revealed their truth, that they never loved you. They loved who you were when you were suppressing yourself for them. Now the mask is off, and you see what Machiavelli saw centuries ago. The best way to test someone's intentions is to stop being convenient. The moment you're no longer easy to access, easy to read, easy to sway, the truth reveals itself. They disappear. They guilt trip. They smear you. They say you're the problem because, in their mind, your boundaries are betrayal. But let them think that. You're not here to manage perception. You're here to master reality. And the reality is, your silence is more honest than their words. You didn't need revenge. You needed distance. You didn't need to explain. You needed to detach, because the most powerful move you'll ever make is no longer making yourself available to people who need your absence, to value your presence. Eighth dark truth: the more you tolerate, the less they respect you. They don't see your patience as strength. They see it as leverage, a weakness, a gap to exploit. And the more you give them the benefit of the doubt, the more they believe they are above consequence. You thought you were buying time, that maybe, just maybe, if you waited long enough, they'd change. If you loved hard enough, they'd wake up. They didn't wake up. They calculated. They watched what you allowed and adjusted, not to be better, but to be more deceptive, less obvious, more strategic. You weren't dealing with brokenness. You were dealing with entitlement wrapped in charm. And charm is the most dangerous mask because it doesn't scream. It whispers. It flatters. It disarms. Until it doesn't. Until one day, you see it: the script, the manipulation, the strategic timing of compliments after criticism, the sudden attention after silence, the guilt-laced affection after they've pushed you too far. Machiavelli wrote that men must either be caressed or destroyed, because anything in between leaves them undecided. You left people undecided about your limits, and they tested you again and again until your silence became permission. But here's the shift: you no longer explain your boundaries. You enforce them, not with anger, not with drama, but with absence. You what? You close the door, and you don't announce it, because the most terrifying power is the one that doesn't need to prove itself. You are no longer explaining why you're done. You're just done. They'll say you're heartless, number. You're just tired of bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer you a bandage. You didn't become cold. You became clear, and clarity, when weaponized, looks like cruelty to those who benefited from your confusion. They called you sensitive. You were. But now your sensitivity has edges. They called you forgiving. You were. But now your forgiveness has conditions. They called you safe. You were. But now, safety comes with rules. The version of you that stayed too long, buried, not in grief, in strategy. Because now you see the truth. Every time you ignore the red flag, you write the script for your own downfall, and you're done being the author of your own betrayal. Ninth dark truth: people don't want you healed. They want you manageable. They want the version of you that's predictable, reactive, soft around the edges. The version that second guesses itself, that waits for permission to exist. Because when you're confused, you're compliant. When you're searching, you're silent. When you're broken, you're easy to bend. But when you become whole, you become inconvenient. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that true independence is threatening. That the moment you stop needing validation, you start shifting the power dynamic. And that shift, it terrifies them. They liked you better when you questioned yourself, because every doubt you had was a discount on your worth. Every hesitation was a door for them to insert their influence. Every insecurity was an invitation to dominate. But not anymore. Because now, you trust your instincts. more than their apologies. You trust patterns more than promises, and you trust your absence more than your presence. Because when you disappear, things reveal themselves. Who reaches out? Who doesn't? Who respects the boundary? Who tests it? You stop trying to fix people who refuse to face themselves. You stop investing in conversations that are meant to confuse you. You stop defending your standards to people who only benefit when you lower them. And you start doing something they never expected. You stop playing. You let the silence speak. You let their discomfort rise. You let them realize, in the emptiness of your presence, what they destroyed with their behavior. That's the real punishment, not revenge, not conflict, just removal. Because when someone gets used to abusing access, nothing hurts more than disconnection. Machiavelli never romanticized justice. He spoke of strategy. He knew most people don't change from pain. They change from consequence. So you stop explaining the fire they started, you just walk away from the smoke, and you let the burn teach them what your words never could. You're not here to convince, you're here to command, and command starts in silence when your presence is no longer a reward, but a decision. Made carefully, delivered without warning. 10th dark truth. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. It doesn't create new monsters. It unmasks the ones who were pretending to be angels. It strips away the need for performance. And what's left is the truth no one wanted to say out loud. You saw it when they thought you needed them. They were kind, generous, humble. But the moment they believed they had the upper hand, their mask slipped. And what was underneath wasn't unfamiliar. It was the thing you were too loyal to name. Contempt. Entitlement, superiority. Machiavelli didn't believe people were evil. He believed they were human, and that humanity, when tested, defaults to advantage. That's why he warned, never appeal to morality when power is in question. Appeal to consequence. Appeal to reality. Appeal to what they fear, not what they value, because values shift. But fear is stable. You spent too long hoping they'd return to the version of themselves you first met. But that version was never real. It was curated, projected, calculated. And now you look at everyone differently, not with suspicion, with clarity. You see how quickly kindness turns to cruelty when leverage shifts. You see how people remember your flaws when your presence starts costing them more than it benefits. You see how they rewrite history not because they're liars, but because their ego can't survive the truth. The truth that you saw them, the truth that you walked away, the truth that you are no longer moved by the tricks that used to keep you in place. And that's the final evolution. Not anger, not vengeance, but unreachability. You don't respond the same. You don't explain the same. You don't exist in the same emotional currency. You've changed the terms. Now your energy is earned. Your mind is closed to manipulation. Your silence is an answer. You've become the person they warned others about, not because you're dangerous, but because you can no longer be deceived. And when you can't be deceived, you can't be used. You are no longer a mirror. You are a wall they don't know how to get through. And that terrifies them, because deep down, they know. They lost you the moment you realized your power was never in your ability to forgive. It was in your ability to vanish.